Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clements. Sam, how are you doing?
Doing great, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastically, although I've got to tell you, over this past weekend, particularly Saturday, I wasn't feeling so great as I think I, along with, most people on the planet, were reading about the drone attacks that Iran launched on Israel.
And this was something that had been talked about really last week was one of the big topics for the market, at least, when this was going to happen, if it was going to happen. And it kind of got to a point where we were like, okay, this is probably going to happen. It's just a matter of what's the extent of it and when is it going to be. And it happened when the markets were closed.
It happened when the markets were closed. And, really on Saturday, I was half expecting the world to erupt in war. Then all of a sudden, over the weekend, things seemed to calm a little bit, thanks largely to the United States and the Western allies. Or I guess we should say Western allies. I mean, France, UK, and a couple of others that helped the Israelis down almost all of the drones. Not all of them, but almost all of them. There was some minor damage. We'll say that. But here on tax day, and that's when we're recording this, Sam, is on tax day, and the podcast is going to drop in a couple of days. A lot can change over the next several days.
And a lot will change. As we sit here on a Monday afternoon, it looks as though hopefully maybe the worst case scenario can be spared.
However, I don't think even if we can avoid the worst case scenario this week, that we're going to be able to continue to kick that worst case scenario down the road forever.
Well, the thing that's interesting about this, and I think we need to back up on why this specific event really even, at least to the Iranians, happened.
Why they April 1st?
Why they felt justified in doing this was the bombing of Iranian embassy.
Yeah.
That's already considered an act of war. I'm just focusing on the Iranians' perspective, why they felt this was justified.
Yeah.
Iranian embassy was bombed, and this was their response. And when I read that these drones were going to take hours to reach Israel, that they were drones that, by and large, this was not a full-scale response that was going to, cause an invasion, cause boots on the ground. This felt like a tit-for-tat kind of thing. And that's why I think the market justifiably so reacted as it did in the morning. This morning it was kind of a relief. The futures opened yesterday and it was a relief that okay, this was a tit for tat, things aren't going to escalate. It kind of felt like things weren't going to escalate much, and then that's kind of how things have gone over there for a while. And then I think the question is now Israel's talking about a response to it, how they have to respond to it, and what that response is going to be is, I think, what's giving the market angst.
Well, I got to tell you, Sam, I hear you. That's a pretty sanguine view of it. Thank you for that. Because, when I take a look at things, I'm going back millennia, just strife in the Middle East. And, if you're a religious person, you can have the first book of the Torah or the book of Genesis in the Christian Bible, and you can read how people in Israel, the Israelites, or I guess modern day Israeli, will always struggle with people on the other side of the Jordan River. So this isn't anything new. This has been going on for quite some time, and I don't think, no matter what Joe Biden has to say about it, or Sunak or Macron, that they're going to quit fighting each other. This was 300 drones in response to Israelis bombing an embassy, in response to, Iran backing Hezbollah and Hamas, and there are just so many because of this.
It's hard to go back to the
because of this, and then going back. You could go all the way back to the very creation of Israel. And so, as long as there does exist a Zionist state, an Israeli state, a Jewish state, if you will, I do believe that the Hardliners in Tehran and some other Middle Eastern countries are going to do whatever they can in order to eradicate it from the face of the earth.
I don't disagree. The thing that's interesting about this to me is other Middle Eastern countries stepping up on the side of Israel.
Well,
the Saudis helping out.
Well, the Saudis are almost, are sworn enemies of the Iranians.
Right. So I think you're getting this not just as Western versus Middle Eastern countries. You're getting this kind of divergence between some Middle Eastern countries that I think want to get in the good graces of the Western countries more. And so I'm wondering how much Iran starts to be isolated over these next couple years and decades. And it's a country with massive amount of STEM degrees. It's got tons of potential that's just been having its thumb pressed down on growth in the country. So I'm wondering what these next couple decades are going to look like.
Well, I think it's going to be real interesting, and it's going to be real interesting to see how Russia responds to Iran moving forward. I mean, obviously, there have been reports that Russia's been importing a number of these drones from Iran and what have you, and working on relations, and then all of a sudden it seems as though you have fundamentalist Muslim terrorist activities in Moscow and other places, and just like, gee whiz, I mean, can the Russians and the Iranians really get along when they are both so diametrically opposed to against one another in terms of religion, which leaves the other one out there, the dragon in the Far East, China. Can Persia, can Iran count on China to be its backing on the global stage?
It's funny, those three countries you mentioned, if you put a Venn diagram of them, what kind of overlaps on what they agree upon seems very small.
There's one big thing that's right in the middle.
Yeah, but there's almost polar opposites on
Yes.
several different fronts.
On many.
An Orthodox Christian country,
Nominally, yeah.
largely,
Yeah.
or for what it's worth.
The third round.
Sure. An Islamic country, a devout Islamic
Yes.
country.
Run by religious theologians.
Right, and a largely agnostic, atheist country.
Yes.
That
Has very little
that
cultural
drives
overlap,
wars.
very little
That drives wars over the last since human existence. It's been religion or money, and
So-
often those two overlap.
So I do have to ask you this, Sam. I mean, kind of veering to the side a little bit. This past weekend, when you were reading all about the attacks on Israel and what have you, were you secretly glad you've got a baby coming up at the end of the month?
I'm glad anyway, whether
Yeah.
Iran wants to do anything or not. But yes, but I don't view this. This to me feels like more just status quo. I mean, this felt so normal. Unfortunately, it almost reminded me of I think it's in Austin Powers where a truck takes like 30 minutes to run over someone. That's what the drones felt like when they took hours to reach their targets.
I think, was that a fish called Wanda when they're going to run over the Kevin Kline character with the
I don't know. I'm picturing the scene in my head where it's taking forever. It's going really slow. I think it was Austin Powers.
I thought it was a fish called Wanda.
I don't know.
Ken is coming to kill me.
I don't know that movie. So
Okay,
if I've seen this skit, then it says something in its own right. I had a sigh of relief when I saw that this was
Really?
When I saw the announcement, the pre-announcement almost. I mean, this got to Western allies so quickly, and all of CENTCOM was pretty well aware of what was going to happen and when it was going to happen, that it truly just felt like a continuation of what has the possible Israeli response to me gives me more angst.
Really?
And that is not me picking the Iranian side. It's if they decide to one-up it to a level that Iran doesn't feel like is justified. I mean, we're just playing this game of positioning right now. It's everyone has to look good and say they did what was deserved. But if somebody goes one step farther of not saying, okay, we're kind of even now. We've done damage back and forth. That's nothing so far has justified escalation in my mind.
All right.
And I'm just waiting for something. That's my concern, is that something does cross the line into escalation.
Well, there you have it. I mean, I hope you appreciate there will be plenty of people that will disagree with you.
Probably are. That's fine.
And I'm not maybe completely at the same camp as you are, but regardless, also this weekend when I was listening to the story, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think Beijing has been talking with Moscow, been talking to Tehran to come up with some devious, Dr. No type scheme to really thwart the Americans. And if something does thwart the Americans, it's almost by happenstance. Because, as we point out, there are just too many culturally different things going on there. That doesn't mean that they all wouldn't like to see the U.S. kind of flounder. Don't get me wrong. But I'm sitting there thinking about it, going, man, if they were clever enough to pull this on out, this is beautiful. You get Russia to just kind of fight a war of attrition with Ukraine, if for no other reason to just bleed NATO stockpiles wide. Just bleed them down. Just run them out of stockpiles. Then you have the Iranians kind of start a war in Gaza and just get the biggest allied or Western power in the Middle East, get them to kind of drain down their supplies, get the Saudis to drain down their supplies fighting the Houthis, however you pronounce it, and then all of a sudden you have the Chinese over here encircling Taiwan. It's like, what are we supposed to focus on in the United States? What are we supposed to focus on in terms of the Western powers? And do we have enough ammunition left in our stockpiles to take care of all of this? And I was just wondering, man, I can't believe they were that clever. What do you think about that?
That would be pretty clever. And, maybe I've said this on and off in different topics. I still believe, and maybe this is naive, in the military supremacy of the United States. I still fundamentally believe that if push came to shove, if we had to get to a point where we were running dry and had legitimate wars that we needed to fight, we're just a resilient group of people, and I still believe in our ability to overcome anything of that nature. I think we're still decades, above and beyond the Iranian military, the Russian military,
okay.
even the Chinese military at this point, although they're probably the closest of the three. Yeah. I still believe in, again, maybe that's naive of me, but I believe in our ability to handle multi-front, war of attrition.
Well, I would say that I would agree with you. I mean, and I read a bunch of defense stuff and go to Jane's and all that. Take a look at, and I would agree with you, but however, I would tell you that I am not quite as confident in our ability to fight a 2 or 3 front war as I was maybe a decade ago. Mm-hmm. A lot of that is just due to supply. Not necessarily technology, not necessarily due to training, not necessarily due to logistics or anything like that. We've got that taken care of. It's just that it seems as though, I mean, I could be completely wrong, and there are people in the military that might be screaming at me, but I don't think I am wrong. We focus more on quality as opposed to quantity.
Mm-hmm.
The smart bombs are going to take care of this. Our jets, our 5th generation jets, the F-35, are certainly much better than anything else. We're getting rid of the A-10 Warthog because it's 2nd generation,
right, and
getting rid of all of this stuff. Our naval ships are, I mean, almost science fiction.
Yeah.
Do we have enough of them? And
mm-hmm.
so I go back to sort of the story. I think I might have talked about this once on Trading Perspectives, how in World War II, Americans captured a German artillery, a piece of heavy artillery, and taking a look at the engineering of it, it's gorgeous. Just absolutely gorgeous. So many interlocking pieces, and the way the rifling in the barrel was. Easily a better piece of
much better technology.
Just much better technology.
Yeah.
Could fire a shell longer and straighter than really our howitzers.
Yeah.
However, the only problem with it was
numbers.
Numbers. You know, that we could lob over, 5, 6 shells by the time the Germans could reload and get one over. And we were producing them so much more rapidly. So while, say, one of our destroyers over there can take care of 3 or 4 Chinese corvettes or frigates, which they build a lot of over there, can we build destroyers faster than they can build corvettes and frigates, if you catch my drift?
Yeah.
At some point, do we just run out of stuff?
Yeah.
And then because we're fighting the Russians, which are just, they're not even trying to win, in my estimation, right? They're just kind of letting the Ukraine.
They're fighting a Russian war.
They're fighting a Russian war of attrition, and let the Ukrainians bleed themselves white and run out of ammunition, and all the ammunition is really ours now, I would say. And you could say maybe the same thing about the Israelis. And so that's what I was concerned with. It's not necessarily that we aren't the best military in the world. It's just, do we still have the same level of industrial capacity where we can, at the drop of a hat, moment's notice, turn all of our economy over to a war footing? And I can't answer that question to the same degree that I could have 10, 20 years ago.
I agree. You brought up World War II for a second, and from 1940 to now, we've become a much bigger economic superpower.
Yeah.
How do you think that part of it plays into it. The sanctions that we could put on countries, and we have more capability on that front than we did 80 years ago.
Well, I would say that back then, I could take a country like China compared to where we were in 1941. Granted, the Chinese started fighting the Japanese in 1937, and people could say even longer than that. There was such a yawning gap in between the Chinese economy and even ours at the time that just would cause economic sanctions. And so what? They're completely backward, and global trade wasn't the same thing, and so that gap has shrunk significantly. What I'm talking about, what concerns me, is more supply chains. We used to be far more in control of our supply chains. We could produce most of our stuff internally. Not saying we were getting the rubber from the United States. We had to import that from Western Africa and all that. I get all that. However, when you take a look at a lot of our armaments, they've got a lot of pieces coming from South Korea. You got a lot of it coming from Japan and Taiwan. And I'm not certain that our supply chain was really quite as global back then as it is now. And that's what I'm saying. We're not in control of our supply chains to the same degree, which does give me a little bit of far more pause. And then plus due to the fact that the stuff is so much more sophisticated now than it used to be, it just by definition takes longer. You know, in World War II, a guy named Henry Kaiser developed something called a Kaiser ship that used welded and not riveted hulls, and they could produce thousands of them. Can our shipbuilding still do that now? And I don't know the answer.
It doesn't seem like it's been a large focus compared to some. We've talked about comparing. We've seen the amount of ships that China is putting out. It's shocking. It's a massive number. And from aircraft carriers down to
I mean, their aircraft carriers are smaller than the Ford class. I mean, I get that. I mean, we focus more on destroyers, and they focus on corvettes and frigates. I mean, they're focusing on smaller size and speed in coastal waters, largely around Asia,
islands, and
I mean, and they are a blue water navy. They can exert force throughout the world, but that seems to be where they're focusing their naval attentions. Is a war that's going to be in the Pacific, as opposed
the South China Sea,
as opposed to a war that's going to be in the Pacific, the Indian, and the Atlantic.
Right.
And so going back to from whence we started in terms of Iran, when I take a look at the entire global military situation, I hear you. The U.S. military is still the 800-pound gorilla. I'm not as confident in its abilities in aggregate as I once was, and I'm also not as comfortable in its abilities to fight a three-front or even a two-front war the way that I once was. And it's not necessarily due to anything else in the world has changed. Technology has changed. Our manufacturing capability and industrial production capability has changed. Supply chains have changed. So much has changed, and I hope we've kept up with it. I hope there's a bunch of secret information I don't have, and I know there is. However, from just kind of looking at it right now, having a son that's going to be graduating from college, I'm more scared about it now than I was. So when I see what happened over this past weekend, that's when all of a sudden I'm like, oh, damn. This scares me.
And I agree. And again, who knows what the Israeli response is going to be. And, I would almost guarantee the U.S. is a part of that decision, or is going to try to be as much of a part of that decision as possible. That scary, it's just this possible escalation. Right now, things have not felt like they have escalated to me.
Yeah. Well, one last question, and I think we're kind of running long on this. Does it bother you as someone of your generation that the President of the United States, knowing that some sort of response is going to happen at some point, told the Iranians don't, and they did?
Yes, I mean that's obviously frustrating. I don't know. I almost this sounds worse. I mean, I almost don't. The Iranians felt like they had to do what they.
So they were going.
They were going to do that, and so it just.
So you see, for me, it didn't bother me whatsoever, because you're absolutely right. because I mean, it wouldn't matter.
That was not the line in the sand, and it'd be dumb to make that the line in the
It
sand.
wouldn't have mattered if Donald Trump had said it, Joe Biden had said it. The Iranians were going to do something.
Their territory got bombed.
In order for them to save face with their own public, they had to do something meaningful enough where they could say we retaliate.
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't
forecast it out.
Yeah, forecast.
Not tons of damage. Not highly populated areas.
Make it pretty well established that you're getting stuff together that we can see it pretty easily with our
give you a few hours heads up once we launch
that
them.
stuff. So that doesn't bother me whatsoever.
The thing. This is on topic but off topic, is just looking at Iran as a country. It has so much potential energy and economic possible superpower. I mean, they have more STEM degrees as a percentage than any country on earth, and it doesn't seem to be an area that's able to grow just due to the political nature of it and the squandering of resources.
You gotta be careful what you say. This gonna scare me. Hope they can't find you. Again, it goes back to the three characteristics of any highly functioning society: individual property rights, adherence to the rule of law, and then also development of human capital that befitting the economy. I don't know what the rule of law is like, but it seems relatively capricious, from what I understand. And individual property rights, I'm not real confident about that. But you're right, overeducated and underperforming.
Yeah.
But we'll just have to see what the future's hold. In the end, like I said, when to start off, we're taping this on Monday the 15th, and a lot can change by the time.
Things will change.
But whatever happens this go around, unless it leads to the eradication of one or two of these countries, we haven't heard the end of it. They will continue to fight each other either directly or indirectly through proxy wars with a Hamas or a Hezbollah, or with the Saudis, with the Houthis in Yemen, and that's just the way it's going to be. I don't know how we can get around it until there is an all-out war, and no one really wants to see that.
I agree.
All right. Guys, thank you all so much for listening. We always love to hear from you all, so if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. If you're interested in reading more, hearing more of what we have to say or how we think, you can always go to oakworth.com, OAKWORTH.com. Take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of exciting information, including links to previous podcasts, as well as links to our blog, Common Sense, and also links to our quarterly analytical piece known as Macro and Market. Sam, anything else to say on this exciting topic?
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.